One day the Nintendo Switch was released, and 3 years later I'm making this video. Hi everyone, it's Ari. Welcome back to the channel. I just wanted to say I've recorded this video 3 times, and all 3 times it's been awful. This is the 4th recording, and I just hope this one turns out better or feasible so I can make a video. So let's get into it. The Nintendo Switch was released back in March of 2017. And while most people love the console, there are a few problems and qualms that people have brought up in the past. And what we're going to do in this Let's Fix video is take a couple of these problems and just fix them up. I've had my Nintendo Switch for about 3 months, and while I've experienced some of these problems, a lot of them I really didn't care about until someone else brought them to my attention, and then I realized, okay, sure, this is something that would have made the Nintendo Switch better.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun or exciting, you make it not that way. I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
Problem number 1 with the Switch is the release. The Nintendo Switch was released way after the 3DS had died. The 3DS had died back in about 2016, with not a lot of games releasing, and the games that releasing were rather niche in comparison to everything else that came before it. The 3DS had a library that primarily based around Fire Emblem, Kirby, Mario, and Pokemon. Despite the fact that there was 2 or 3 major releases of Pokemon, it didn't drive as many people to buy the console as was a case of the original Game Boy or the Game Boy Advance. The Switch was hyped up for almost a year, and the problem with hyping up a console that much is simply you get hype burn. So how it works is, if you release something and you continuously hype it up without actually giving people the product, people's hype will, or people's interest in the product will skyrocket and keep growing to a certain point, and then past that point people just don't care anymore. And I feel Nintendo released it just a little bit too late. Had the Nintendo Switch's trailer launched 8 months before the Nintendo Switch actual release, or 6 months before the Nintendo Switch actual release, you wouldn't have people burning themselves out on the hype and actually be more engaged and inclined to buying this console. It's the same problem that happened with the Xbox One X, that people saw this and there wasn't a lot of clear information, there was a lot of speculation, and people hyped themselves up too much, and then the product actually released, it didn't release as well simply because people's expectation was too high. Another problem with the launch was the launch titles. The Nintendo Switch released with Just Dance and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild as the major releases, with a Mario on the horizon, a Pokemon on the horizon, and Super Smash Bros. That everyone knew was coming without an official announcement until the official announcement was made. So it had a promising future lineup without actually having the games available at the time. What I would have done is delay the release of the Nintendo Switch and release it alongside 4 major games, 4 very different games that would bring in a bigger variety of audience, and this would bring more people into buying the Nintendo Switch, resulting in higher sales and higher interest in the console. So this also plays into a part later on in the video that I'm going to speak about. So how I would have done it is release the console in 4 possible bundles. I would have had a bundle with Legend of Zelda, even if you just had to name it something stupid like an Explorer Edition, a Mario Edition, Super Smash Bros, or Pokemon. I wouldn't have waited for those studios, but I would have at least waited for 1 or 2, just so that there's more variety on release. Next part is the price point of the Nintendo Switch. A lot of people are complaining that the price is so high and it doesn't compare to its competitors in terms of processing power or graphical capabilities. You don't buy a Nintendo for the graphical capabilities, you buy the Nintendo for the Nintendo experience. Duh. The feeling of nostalgia you get when you play Pokemon and you see your favorite Pokemon, the feeling when you play Legend of Zelda and you realize that this has a similar Zelda feel, but this done so well. Or play Mario Odyssey and it just feels like Mario 64 all over again. So the price point that it released at in South Africa was 4,499 rand. Nintendo really doesn't have that big of a following inside South Africa. People are more into Xbox Ones or PlayStations and even PC gaming over the nostalgia feel. That is a cultural thing that I'm going to explore in another video. The next problem was the add-ons for the Nintendo Switch. So, on launch by the Nintendo Switch, any of the games, there was a shielding case and a screen guard that was way overpriced, as well as a Pro Controller. And that was the only first party Nintendo related accessories you could buy for the Switch. There was a couple of third party things that you could get, but it wasn't officially licensed by Nintendo, so it really didn't capture people's attention. People were a little bit scared that these products would be inferior or they just wouldn't work. A lot of people were talking about upscaling on the Nintendo Switch when it launched. People wanted to capture game footage in a higher resolution at a higher pixel rate, and honestly, that's up to them. That's all good. But the Nintendo Switch puts out at 1080p when you're running it onto a screen, although the frame rate suffers, or it runs 720p natively on the little screen and the frame rate's relatively okay. So a fix for this obviously would to release a couple of products for the Nintendo Switch just so that you could get the standard experience as well as the Pro experience. So I'd release a separate dock, upscales the output to the TV, not necessarily for a higher resolution, but simply for a higher frame rate, which is what you get with a couple of third-party accessories. But if they just had to license that, slap it into a Switch dock with a nice decal on it, they could have made a lot more money and it would have drawn more people towards their product than another person's product. The next accessory I would have made was a hard case for the Nintendo Switch. Sure, there's a bunch of companies that are making hard Switch cases, but it's not the same if it's not licensed. People will more likely buy the floppy license case rather than the hard case. That all they had to do was get a company that's going to make these things, give them their name, put their name on it, take a little bit of the profit, and raise the price point. And both companies would have benefited. But no, that didn't happen. Okay, and then the final problem was the hardware problems that the Nintendo Switch has. I have had my Nintendo Switch for just about a year, and the big problem with my Nintendo Switch is that I'm getting what a lot of people are also getting, which is Joy-Con drift. Joy-Con drift is when your Nintendo Switch putting in inputs on the Joy-Cons without you actually putting them in. It simply makes gameplay unplayable, and it just ruins your Nintendo Switch experience. What I would have done is, when the Nintendo Switch first was going to be manufactured, I would have made it manufacturing back from 100 to about 500, send them out to all the developers that were going to make your first party games, have them in the Nintendo Switch's headquarters, have people play on the actual device instead of using the Pro controllers, which is actually what Nintendo had done for the employees. They provided a Pro controller so people played on that rather than the handheld, and that's where the problems came around. There wasn't enough testing done on the product to realize the faulty Joy-Cons were an issue. If they had done that, they would have picked up that the Joy-Cons were a problem and then just followed the right steps in order to fix it and make a better quality product that people wouldn't be complaining about as much. I've heard people say that they're not going to pick up the Nintendo Switch simply because of the hardware problems, and they reference the Joy-Con specifically, and if the Joy-Con is turning people off, then you should fix your Joy-Con. Okay, so there's two versions of the Nintendo Switch. There's the old version and the new revised version that apparently has a better screen, but it does have a better battery. I've seen both Switches side by side running Mario Odyssey, and I can't tell the difference, honestly. People are saying that the screen looks better. I can't tell.
Fuck me, do you need some glasses?
But the Nintendo Switch's battery life isn't enough of an upgrade to warrant calling it the new revised model of the Nintendo Switch and having it at a higher price point. I would have at least fixed the Joy-Con problem, which is still a problem people are having, and maybe increase the storage capability of the Nintendo Switch from 32 gigabytes to 64, and then you could release something called a Pro model. It's really not an upgrade. What it currently is just fixing a problem that the original Switch had at a higher price point. And then the final little hardware gripe I have is the placement of the SD card slot. The SD card slot is placed in the dumbest place that I could have possibly thought. They put it behind the kickstand on the original Nintendo Switch. This results in when the Nintendo Switch kickstand is open, the card is exposed. You can't have a hardware component as sensitive as a hardware card reader exposed to the elements, especially if your console is meant to be taken outside and dust can get into the Switch. It just won't work. Fix for that. Make a flap for it. You can leave it in the same place. Just make a little flap that clips in, so nothing can get into that.
And you are not welcome here. You are most specifically not invited in.
That's all the little issues that I have with the Nintendo Switch. Thank you so much to everyone that watches my videos. Did you guys have the same problem with the Nintendo Switch? Do you guys think that there's something Nintendo could have done better in regards to the Switch? Do you have other issues that the Nintendo Switch has that hasn't been addressed even by Nintendo? Please leave them in the comments below. I love reading feedback from you guys, whether it's on my Instagram or on my Twitter. And yeah, thank you so much. See you in the next video.